Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. It's Tuesday. The Steelers haven't announced any official moves of yet, but if they're going to make changes on the coaching staff, offensive line has been one of the main targets. What kind of coach should they get? Should it be an older coach who's been used to coaching successful offensive lines in the NFL, or should they go for the younger, more innovative route? We'll talk about that with Alan Saunders, as well as other major questions as we still await words from Art Rooney this week. All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $20 off your first purchase only on Game Time. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Alan Saunders. He's back here from SteelersNow.com. Alan, wanted to talk to you about the Steelers' need on at the position of offensive line coach, because that is that's a position where the Steelers could see some improvement. We haven't seen the development of Broderick Jones. They were hoping to see to see this offensive line take steps forward this year. If anything, it felt pretty stagnant here. But when the Steelers last had what everyone considered a great offensive line coach, and I think the performance does back that up, Mike Munchak was the guy. But he was a long experienced coach in the NFL, Hall of Fame player himself. He was a head coach before he even got there. He was an older guy that came in and was the kind of coach that was it. Is that the kind of coach they should be looking for this kind of a group, or should the Steelers be looking for the young, more innovative offensive line coach if such guys are out there that are worth of getting?
I'm not honestly sure that I agree that the offensive line was stagnant this year. I mean, they played basically what amounts to three rookies from center to right tackle. They also dealt with a bunch of injuries. James Daniels out for the year. Nate Herbig was out for the year, so that they didn't have any. Troy Fautanu was out. I mean, they didn't have much
point.
depth. Like I thought the Steelers' offensive line, considering the amount of injuries they had and the inexperience they had, I think they did okay this year. Now, they aren't the offensive line they want, and they are the offensive line that apparently Arthur Smith needs, right? Because they just, or maybe Mike Tomlin needs, I don't know, somewhere, and maybe Art Rooney needs, I don't know. Somewhere in the Steelers' brain trust, they decide they need to run the ball more than almost any other team in the NFL, despite being one of the worst teams in the league in terms of rushing game efficiency. That can't continue. And they're going to probably take a step back at the running back position this offseason. I assume they're going to let talk. Whoever his replacement is, I'm sure they will not spend the same resources they spent on Najee Harris, but I doubt he'll be as good. So, the only way to get better is to find a way to make this offensive line better and quickly. So I guess I understand the idea of making a change at offensive line coach. In terms of old, new, young, I don't know. This isn't a position where there are you're not going to win the press conference. There's not going to be a star hire where you're like, oh my God, they got that guy.
Why didn't they get that guy all along?
Yeah. But I'll say this, I think it seems pretty clear that one of the criticisms you can make of Arthur Smith is that he's going to do things his way. It did not seem like throughout the course of the 2024 season that he adapted to the Steelers personnel much. It just felt like trying to make Najee Harris running outside the tackles. It was just no matter what, they were going to do the Arthur Smith stuff. So if you're going to do the Arthur Smith stuff, go get an Arthur Smith coach. Keith Carter was the offensive line coach of the Tennessee Titans when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator, when Derrick Henry was the running back, and when Derrick Henry was the best he's ever been in his entire NFL career, including right now with the Baltimore Ravens. He had been with the Jets. The Jets are replacing their entire coaching staff. He's available. If you're going to make a move at offensive line coach, and you're going to have Arthur Smith as the coordinator, which seems pretty likely. It was announced today he's not getting the Bears job. I don't think it's particularly likely he ends up getting the Jets job. If you're going to have Arthur Smith, you may as well have an Arthur Smith guy as your offensive line coach.
And so that's kind of where I guess I want to go is, an Arthur Smith guy, what does that do for the Steelers? Because I think that whereas I'm not saying that Pat Meyer was terrible at his job. I just didn't, I don't, and yes, they went over, they did a lot of obstacles. Not only did, where they have rookies, not only did James Daniels go down, not only did, Isaac Seumalo got hurt, Broderick Jones started the season hurt. You were right. They were just crushed with injuries throughout the year. I just think that the Steelers, they need to see this group coalesce into a powerful unit, or at least an above average unit. I think that they were kind of average this year. And yes, if we graded on a curve with the injuries and how many rookies they had and young players, sure, there's things that were impressive, but they need this group to be better than that next year if they're going to take a step forward. And I think that's where I look around and I think, man, things that happened during Pat Meyer's tenure, guys moving positions and it not working out. You look at Kendrick Green moving from guard to center, didn't work for the Steelers. He went to the Texans, he had a couple good games with the Texans, didn't exactly pan out to be a big step up. Now, Kevin Dotson, though, I will say, he was playing in the guard position that he was less comfortable with the Steelers, goes to the Rams, flips guard sides, plays better for them, and was a plus factor for them in the playoffs, for them this year. And so now you're in a situation where the same question's happening right now with Broderick Jones. Everyone says he's supposed to be a left tackle, and he's talked about wanting to play left tackle, but he's been right tackle this whole time because Dan Moore has to be left tackle. I think that's one of the things that we're looking at here is, and these are the intricacies that they're not gonna be obvious on film as far as when Arthur Smith gives a play call. This comes down to what kind of position coaches can get more out of young players, when they're trying to develop them.
I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that question. I think, look, I thought Zach Frazier had a really good rookie year. I thought Mason McCormick exceeded all reasonable expectations for his play. So I think there is some of that happening right now. The question about Broderick Jones, I don't know how you decide where the problem lies. Is the problem Pat Meyer? Is the problem Broderick Jones? And where, I don't know. I don't think you could hire a coach looking at the guys you have on your roster and say, do we have to hire the Broderick Jones coach? You got to hire the offensive line coach that makes the most sense for your team. And you got to hope that it makes the most out of Broderick Jones. I think this whole left-right thing is totally overblown. Broderick Jones does not pass protect well enough to be an NFL left tackle. Never has. And I think at this point, it's fair to assume he never will. I don't know why they're even pretending that he can. But I suppose if they want to continue to go down that road, sure, you got to find someone who can make that priority number one.
I think the bottom line is they need this group to form into something next year, and that's where they haven't been. And again, it's how much of that is on Broderick Jones just needing to play better and needing to be better at his fundamentals. Those are things that can't be answered. And I also point this out as much respect is due to Mike Munchak. Mike Munchak also inherited two first team all pro players on his offensive, like Pouncey to capture. The investments were there for that to be a really good offensive line when he got to Pittsburgh, and then it blossomed under him even further. They were able to get guys like Chris Hubbard, who were swing tackles to turn into guys that eventually got paid by other teams, and so but I think that's the thing is that whereas you acknowledge hey, those investments then worked out. Mike Munchak worked then. Now you have 2 more first round picks that you picked for this team and a second round pick in Zach Frazier, and you need those guys to work out. I just wonder what kind of coach that is, who that coach is, and if they're going to be able to find that kind of coach to work for them this time around, so that they can develop that offensive line. Because if they don't develop an offensive line next year, Alan, this might be an even worse situation next year.
Yeah, they're getting Troy Fautanu back. True. I think that'll be an improvement for one of their tackle spots anyway. I don't know. I think coaching only goes so far, and I like the talent they have. We'll see what they do, with the other guard spot moving forward. Obviously, Isaac Seumalo not a part of the long-term plan at that spot. He's getting up there, so one way or the other, kind of at some point we'll be moving on. But I think the idea that you're going to hire an offensive line coach and all of a sudden that's going to fix everything, I really don't see it.
I don't think it's going to fix everything. Because again, there are certain things that come down to the Jimmies and the Joes and not the X's and O's, and I agree with that. But I also think that they need this is going to be a part of their decision making as far as who they bring in next year, which is something else that we could talk about. You brought up Arthur Smith being talked to by other teams. Teams have interviewed Arthur Smith. Teams have also requested trades for Mike Tomlin. You talked about that in your morning show yesterday about the case for keeping Mike Tomlin. I want to talk to you about how things have played out, where you see things going. We'll also get to thoughts on Art Rooney before he speaks and does his end of season presser. We'll do all that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, to remind you, the show is also brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories is attending a concert last year where the energy, excitement was unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great sets so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Whether you're looking for bands coming to town for the next big concert or want to get tickets for the next big game, Game Time is the best place to find those tickets. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Plus, the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. Find tickets in the same section row for less somewhere else. Guess what? Game Time will give you credit to 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, let's talk about a few things here. As you said, the Jets are the Bears, they've hired Ben Johnson. He takes that job. Arthur Smith was interviewed for that one. He was also being looked at for the Jets. I think both of us can kind of agree. Neither of us really saw either of those happening. That was, I think, those guys kicking the tires, just seeing what Arthur Smith had. Arthur Smith just exploring what opportunities are out there. I mean, it's no shocker that any former head coach wants to check out the opportunities at them being a head coach again next year. But between those two interviews and then the calls that have been made from other teams to be interested in trading for Mike Tomlin, reportedly the Bears, one of those teams, in that, I want to lead with Mike Tomlin. You made a case in your morning show for SteelersNow.com, about the case for keeping Mike Tomlin here. Can you dive into, for those that think that if the Bears were offering a first round pick and a really good player, why would you not take that for Mike Tomlin right now? Can you offer your thoughts as far as what the Steelers' reasons are for that?
Well, first of all, I think that's probably way out of line in terms of the compensation that the Steelers would get in a trade for Mike Tomlin. I can't imagine it being they don't have any leverage. He's got the no trade clause. They want him. It's just not even.
That's the other thing. Mike Tomlin has a no trade clause, so he calls the shots here. That's.
I think the Steelers would be lucky to get when Bruce Arians went from Arizona to Tampa. I think they got a third and a fifth or something like that. You're not getting anything that is going to make this team one bit better next year in a trade for Mike Tomlin. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, he doesn't want to go, so it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter because he doesn't want to. And the third thing is, the idea that the Steelers aren't going to get better probably next year by trading away Mike Tomlin. And I understand the argument that people will make that they should want to be worse, that they should want to go get a draft pick. But the organization does not want to do that. Any coach that comes in here is going to be told your job is to win and you will be fired for not winning, not the opposite. And so, you look at this team, there's no answers at quarterback. The real problem with this team is the lack of talent on offense. And I don't necessarily think that you could make a different decision, but I think there's a case to be made for keeping Mike Tomlin and just figuring out the quarterback. But this is a whole punt on a season. And the Steelers have never really done that. And it's not even they're a tanking punt. It's there are no ways for them to make this team significantly better this year. They just have to like. So I had somebody in my Twitter mention saying like they're just trying to do the same thing again. It's not trying to do the same thing again. It's trying to add another year of the same thing onto the last two and try to build through the draft, build through the trenches out and develop a team so that when you get to a point where you can add a quarterback to the situation, you can make a big impact right away. I mean, I guess that's the theory, but having Mike Tomlin or not having Mike Tomlin doesn't change that process one bit. Like, it doesn't matter.
I'm right with you there, especially this year where I'm not sold on this quarterback draft. Draft class.
I'm the opposite of not sold. Whatever the opposite. It's horrible. The guys that are going to go in the top 5, I would only sort of kind of want where the Steelers are picking at 21.
And that's the thing, is those guys are going to go really high, which means the Steelers will have to trade up a lot of assets. I said this when we were on the final word together Sunday night. The Steelers need to stay focused and don't lose sight of the plan. This was always supposed to be a bridge year this year as well. Like, as exciting as things got when they were 10-3, Russell Wilson playing well, offense looked like it was clicking. This was still the bridge year. Like, Russell Wilson was not brought in to be the end all be all, the ultimate franchise. It would be great if he was. It'd be great if he turned into that and he became a superstar quarterback for the Steelers. But both him and Justin Fields were part of the pieces until this to hold it down while the Steelers kept developing their roster so that eventually they can go get the superstar quarterback in their prime that would lead them to the promised land. And I think that's where the Steelers are still right now. And I think Steelers fans are frustrated that they're not past that point. But like we've been talking about, they still need to develop an offensive line. Like that's the thing about this team right now, is that let's say that in 2 years' time, there's a really good draft class at quarterback, and there's like that version of Jaden Daniels is available to you, and the Steelers get it. Now, to Mike Tomlin's point, I think Ben Roethlisberger made this point in his podcast. If the Steelers invest enough around the roster that they can afford to not need like 4 picks in a draft to hit for them to be solid across the board, that's when you can go get your quarterback. A reminder that the Chiefs were the second seed in the AFC when they traded up to go get Patrick Mahomes at 10th overall. It is not unforeseeable that you could go get a franchise quarterback even when you're having, those just over the mark winning seasons, those 10-win seasons without going far in the playoffs. It is possible to do that. But again, it will matter a lot less if you don't develop the things that you need to develop right now, whether that's offensive line, strengthen more in the defensive line, maybe a better cornerback room and a better wide receiver room. If you don't have those ready for when that moment does arrive, then those are going to be the missed opportunities that are going to hurt you the most. Whereas like right now, I think it sucks for the Steelers that they didn't get a playoff win this year. It stinks, but this was never the year that they were going to be the Super Bowl champion Steelers that could get the 7th ring and to start a new dynasty or anything like that.
The 3 most important positions on offense are quarterback, left tackle, and wide receiver. And the Steelers, frankly, stunk at those 3 positions this year. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to win with that kind of talent. They have to find a way. Now, it's not their fault. They tried. Troy Fautanu was hurt. They set that whole position back a year. I assume they're going to try to do something at wide receiver. I assume they're going to try to do something at quarterback. I don't know what. There's not much out there to try. I guess the big risk you take of keeping Mike Tomlin, the risk of keeping Mike Tomlin is that it's not like the quarterback position has gone swimmingly the last few years.
Agreed.
And so is that the right guy to be in place when you find that next quarterback? Is that the right guy to help you find that next quarterback? And I think you can point to some decisions along the way, that make that questionable. I don't think they handled Kenny Pickett great. I don't. Mm-hmm. I don't think they ever put him in a position to succeed, both from the way he was never with the first team and then gets thrown into the starting lineup as a rookie to keeping Matt Canada as his offensive coordinator when it clearly wasn't working into a second season. Like, I don't think they did a great job. Now, I don't know if Kenny Pickett was ever going to turn into anything here or not, but there's evidence there that this is probably not the right group to do that. But I think, that's the risk you take by keeping him. But I don't think there's any harm done in giving Tomlin 2025, no matter what. Because the best case scenario quarterback is Justin Fields. They're not going to break him any more than he's already been broken. It really, it's sad, but it really does not matter who the coach is this year in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's the frustrating part. It was like, well, it doesn't matter. Then why not just change it? I think the thing is that the Steelers, they need to keep developing things right now. And listen, again, this is where I think that when we go back to offensive line coach, they need to find someone who's going to be a person that can help this group. They need to form leaders on this offense too. I think that's something that they've been devoid of. Since like the end of 2020, when Pouncey, DeCastro both retired, and then Ben Roethlisberger was gone the next year. They need to see this group, and this is another reason why you talked about you might go take a step backwards in the running back room. It's why I thought it would just made sense to just sign Najee Harris to his 5th-year extension last year. You keep a vet in the room. He works with Pat Freiermuth. They can be two leaders for you. It wouldn't have been that expensive, and you're not asking yourself when you're going into free agency or the draft this year, what do you do at running back? Because now that's an added list to things when you have to reconsider defensive line, cornerback, wide receiver, and then there's other needs that we can get into there. And I still think offensive line isn't something they altogether ignore either, considering Isaac Seumalo didn't play well, and they'll probably need some depth additions on the offensive line. Presuming that Fautanu's healthy, Broderick Jones is still with you,
and all those rookies jobs and not have anybody else there. Like
exactly. So like there's going to be a lot of investments this year, and like keeping Najee Harris would have been again a steady Eddie guy to keep around. Talking about Eddie Faulkner too, the running back coach, but like you could have kept that 1-2 punch that you had, and if the offensive line actually does take a step forward, then who knows? Maybe you might see the best years of those guys ever, because that's what you've been waiting to develop, and it just hasn't clicked over the past few years. So I'm right with you. Like the Steelers are in a position where this is not an easy fix to turn into an elite team. I think they can be a more pesky team. I think that they can be a team that can be a little more annoying for some of these top tier teams that have elite quarterback play. And we've seen it over the years. Mike Tomlin's pulled off the upsets over Joe Burrow and Josh Allen when they've been at their heights. But at the same time, you have to keep developing things, and there's got to be a realization that like, hey, this still, this isn't, the super loaded roster with the star quarterback in it that's plug and play, and you send them out there and you expect to just knock them all down and get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you don't have that guy, and the Steelers don't have that guy and aren't going to have that guy at least next year, probably not for a couple of years, your ceiling is limited. And I think the Steelers tried to sort of split the difference and say, like, they didn't operate like a team that was desperate to win this year. Like when they were trying to trade for Brandon Ayuk, it's not like they were trading, multiple first-round picks. We're going all in. Like they left cap space, unaccounted for this past season that they could have spent. And so, like, they know that they're real. Like their actions tell us they know that they're not there. Like they know that they're not that team right now. The question is what has to happen to get there, and how long is it going to take? And to me, I think like when you look at the coaching, I'm more frustrated. Even though the offense is not very good, I'm more frustrated by the defensive coaching. I think the offense doesn't have the talent to succeed. So how am I going to blame the coaching? The defense could have been better, although it really would not have mattered that much if they were. Maybe the Steelers get one more game, no matter how well coached that defense is. I don't like them going to Buffalo, going to Kansas City, and winning against one of those teams right now with the offensive personnel they have. I think you can excuse the coaching staff for the performance this season and look at and say, hey, like what happened compared to their talent level is not that bad. I think the real question is, can they be the group to turn it around, and where do you need to make changes for that to happen?
As of right now, we don't know when Art Rooney is supposed to talk, as he don't normally gives his end of season address to the Pittsburgh media. But when he does, I think it'd be interesting to have some things in line as far as what needs to be talked about. We'll talk about that with Alan Saunders next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you, this show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. It's playoff time. If you're like me, you want to make the most of the final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards, rushing touchdowns, and you have a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. And when your picks hit, Prize Pick makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL. You'll get $50 instantly when you play just $5 in a lineup. That's right. Prize Picks, run your game. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code Locked On NFL, and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup only on Prize Picks. $50 instantly for playing just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, I've never got a chance to sit down in an Art Rooney postseason presser. Now, I've sat down in pressers with Art Rooney, but it was one about they were like extending the lease of Heinz Field / Acrisure Stadium. In fact, it was when they were renaming it to Acrisure Stadium. That's when I think the only time I've really sat down in one of those. So I ask you, like, in this setting now, what are the things that that really are askable of Art Rooney? Because we're talking about like Mike Tomlin, like, what big changes are going to be made this year to switch things up and to turn things around. Where do you look at for those questions for Art Rooney?
Yeah, I mean, I think he needs to justify the decision to keep Mike. I think that's fair. I think there should be some real questions about the identity of the team and how much that has become a tail that wags the dog in some ways. Like, are they so married to being known as a team that wins on defense and by running the football and things like that, that they're unwilling to consider alternatives, and that is just the lane they've decided they're going to be in and unwilling to come out of. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions like that. And certainly there's a lot of like the Tomlin situation. How much does this contract matter? Like were things like a trade considered? Obviously they were, because there's a no trade clause, so it's considered by somebody. I just think, I think in general, when you look at this team, somebody needs to speak with their actions more than their words. And so I think the press conference, honestly, is going to feel a little hollow no matter what. If you're going to come out and say, hey, 10-7 isn't acceptable, but like, what's the plan to get from A to B? And I don't really think there's any answer to that question.
I think that's the hard part right now, right? The answers aren't easy, and it's more like they're just going to have to get to work here. I do think the questions about Tomlin and how things are certainly pertinent to Art Rooney, as far as what he's going to say about why he's sticking with them, and is it more contract based versus belief in him? And of course, like, Rooney's not going to come out and say, oh yeah, I only kept him because I don't want to owe him all that dead money, all that guaranteed money, and not get anything for it. That's not how you come out and sound confident about anything. But I do think the identity question is very relevant, and that's something that could be interesting to hear from Art Rooney, as far as his trust in the front office to get them there and to be this identity that works for them. Because I look at how the Steelers want to play football, and again, I look across the NFL. There's plenty of teams playing like that and being very successful. The Eagles are very much one of those teams. Go look at how they beat the Rams in this game. Saquon Barkley ran the ball. The offensive line dominated the line of scrimmage. Jalen Hurts certainly is a good player, but he didn't have his best game. The wide receivers that they had didn't have their best games, and they had a physical upfront defense. I do think that there's room to be like that. I think it's just about what can be done differently to get them to that point is the question. And is it simply Mike Tomlin, or is it maybe investing in more coaches? You and I have talked about this before. It might not even be about switching coaches, as it might be more about adding coaches to the coaching staff. Like when they added Brian Flores, it wasn't that they removed someone to hire him. They simply just said, he's got a job this year. And maybe it involves something like that to add more voices to this coaching staff.
Yeah, I really think that's an area of easy critique for the Steelers, is their coaching staff is small. It does not seem like a coaching staff. Like, I don't have everybody's salary in front of me, but it does not seem like a highly paid coaching staff. The word on the street is that, comparatively, the Steelers don't pay great for their coaches. And like, why? This is a championship caliber organization. They want to be the best team in the league. How do you not want to be the best in every area? How do you not want to have the best coaching staff? And I just think no one's ever gotten a satisfactory answer to that question. I understand why Brian Flores wanted to leave. I don't understand why they never wanted to replace him. I don't understand why they didn't see how having first TA add to Keith Butler and then Flores add to TA and say, oh, this was a good thing for our team. Let's not only continue that, let's add that concept to the offensive side of the ball where they've been struggling. Like, I don't understand where is that a mindset thing? Is it Tomlin stubbornness? Is it not? Is it cheap? What is it? Like, I don't think we've ever gotten a satisfactory answer there, and I don't know that we will. But like, I feel like that's a problem that could be addressed with this team. And I think when you fall short, especially when you look at this defense, there just is not a hole on this defense. Like, there just is not. And for it to be finished the way it did, I think there needs to be some hard questions of the way the coaching staff is assembled for sure.
And I think a part of that, like you said, is figuring it out. Terrell Austin's another person that we've talked about on this show as far as being in target. Now, his contract is not up, so it is not for sure that he's going to be gone. Carl Dunbar's, I believe, is, and so maybe he's part of that. But the Steelers have a lot to look at, and that's where I think with Rooney it's going to become like those are going to be the questions that will be interesting to see him address. Now, let's also make it clear, like, these aren't like, blockbuster press conferences where the craziest things get said. This isn't Jerry Jones after a Cowboys loss where he takes to a podcast and he just gets hyped up about something. Art Rooney's going to do whatever he can to quell any loud noises. He's going to try to keep that to a minimum and make the Steelers and make it be about, like, the Steelers still having their aim, still having Mike Tomlin captaining the ship and figuring things out. The question will be, what can they get results from that prove useful for the Steelers sooner rather than later? And like we're saying, it isn't as much of an easy result. I think that part of it, and again, this goes back to what I said at the end of the final word, I think the Steelers are still in the middle of a journey to get back to being one of those teams and to having a complete roster. And they have the good parts of their defense to get them there, but they needed other strengths to develop. When Russell Wilson was playing well and slinging the ball in the third quarter of the season with the games he had against the Commanders, the games he had against the Bengals, the second game against the Browns, those were like, okay, cool, but they needed this run game to become more efficient this year, and it never did. And that's where you look at Arthur Smith. That's where you look at the talent that you've assembled in the O-line. Can you make that happen? Because if you do, then all of a sudden now you have more assets. Now you have more things to lean on to win games. And even this year, like, you saw it step up. Like, everyone says, 10-7, they were just the same thing. No, they were not. They took several changes last year. They added to a linebacker. They completely flipped around the quarterback room. When people say, that nothing ever changes for the Steelers, they changed a whole lot. Yes, the record stayed the same. They also played a much tougher schedule, especially down the stretch, that cost them. They didn't lose to two win teams at home this year. They lost to some really doggone good playoff teams that cost them that stretch. But that's where I think the acknowledgement is that, hey, this is not a fixer-upper where you just come in and do it overnight. This is a long-term project that they're probably year 2 or year 3 of truly investing into.
Yeah, I think it's a tough sell, right? I mean, like, I don't know that anyone with the Pittsburgh Steelers logo on their shirt has ever stood up and said, like, we're not the team we want to be, and not only that, we're probably at least a year away from getting there. Like, I don't know if anybody's ever said that as speaking for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that's the facts. That's the truth, is that they are not the team they want to be, and they're not that close. And that, honestly, like, they're better than they were, but they're still pretty far. And those things that they are lacking, stalwart left tackle, number 1 wide receiver, elite quarterback, they're really, really hard to find. Like, they're really hard to find. It's not going to be easy. And even if you spend the resources in trying to draft them, take the first quarterback taken in each of the last 2 years did not turn out to be the best player. Like it's just, it's hard. And I don't know that there's patience from the fan base to hear that message. I think people want their pound of flesh. And I don't think that there's anything rational behind it, but I think the anger is real. And I don't know how that message goes over, because there's no upgraded quarterback coming. Like, it's just not happening. And that's the big thing. Like, what's the difference between the Steelers and the teams playing? I mean, there's lots of differences, but that's the big one. Like, that's the one place. Look at Washington. People say, oh, you could get a lot better in one offseason. You can get a lot better in one offseason when you go from, I don't remember who the Commanders quarterback was last year, Taylor Heineke, whoever, Sam Howell. When you go from Sam Howell to Jaden Daniels, you can get a lot better. When you already had Russell Wilson and you're picking 21st and it's a bad quarterback class, like, there's nowhere to go. Like, there's no easy areas of improvement. It is going to take more than one consecutive, more good draft for the Steelers to really get to where they're going.
We'll keep you up to date with all of that processes to get ready. We get ready for the draft. We still have to do our full end of season grades. I'm going to try to start those up after the conference championships to get those going so we can have those all done before the combine. It's a lot of tabulating of stars and skulls over the year, as you guys can imagine. But that's what often sets up the tone as far as free agency, who you re-sign, who you don't. So we'll be keeping you up to date with all of that, and we'll keep you up to date if there is a date for Art Rooney to talk, because if that happens, or when that happens, that's when we'll be able to ask some of these questions you saw in here. Let us know in the comment section what some of your questions are for Art Rooney, whether it's about Mike Tomlin, the coaching staff, hiring practices, the team construction, whatever that is. But we'll keep it here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, thank you, Alan, for joining us. Let people know where they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
At @Saunders_PGH on all of the social media outlets that are currently legal to be on in this country. PGH Steelers Now's its account, and SteelersNow.com. You can find my podcast, Steelers Afternoon Drive, on the Steelers Now YouTube page or anywhere you find podcasts.
Absolutely. He's Alan Saunders. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias. Same handle everywhere, at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. You can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down things on your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here tomorrow with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.